The storm outside raged like the turmoil in her chest. Rain pounded against the wooden walls of the barn, and the wind howled through the cracks as if echoing her panic. She clutched at the cowboy's coat, her fingers digging into the worn leather as though it were a lifeline. "If you leave me, I'll die," she whispered, her voice breaking in the spaces between thunderclaps. Every word trembled, every breath ragged as her wide eyes searched his for any hint of compassion. The cowboy froze, a single step back betraying the inner struggle he'd been fighting. His rugged face, usually stoic and unreadable, betrayed a flicker of uncertainty. He wanted to say something, anything, but the words stuck heavy and useless in his throat. He'd faced danger, outlaws, and storms far worse than this. Yet nothing had tested him like the raw, desperate plea of a woman clinging to him for life itself. Lightning illuminated the barn in sharp, fleeting flashes, casting long shadows across the hay-strewn floor. Her small frame trembled, wet strands of hair plastered to her face. She pressed closer, her warmth searing through the chill of the rain-soaked air. "Please," she begged again, voice cracking under the weight of fear and longing. I can't survive without you." The cowboy's hand hovered near hers but didn't move. His chest heaved with controlled restraint. He had learned long ago that getting too close, letting someone in, could bring pain he wasn't ready to face. Yet seeing her like this, vulnerable, terrified, completely dependent, stirred something he couldn't ignore. He took another step back, as if the distance might shield him from the storm in her eyes. But even as he did, he felt the pull of her desperation like a rope around his heart, tightening with each breath. Outside, the rain fell harder, drumming a frantic rhythm that matched her racing pulse. She tilted her head, searching his face, and whispered again, almost pleading, "Don't go. I need you." For a moment, time seemed to pause. The barn was silent except for the relentless hammering of rain, the distant rumble of thunder, and her soft, urgent voice. He could not bring himself to leave, yet he could not yet fully embrace the responsibility she begged him to take. The tension hung thick in the air, a fragile thread between two souls caught in the storm. Her eyes widened in panic, glistening with unshed tears, and she pressed closer, hoping, praying that he might stay. The cowboy's gaze met hers, and for the first time that night, the walls he had built around his heart began to tremble. The cowboy's gaze lingered on her desperate eyes, yet his mind drifted back to a time he wished he could forget. The rain outside masked the echoes of a past that haunted him, moments he could never erase. Faces of those he had failed flickered in his memory, friends, strangers, loved ones, people he had tried to protect but couldn't. Each loss had left a scar, invisible but aching, and he had promised himself he would never let anyone else close enough to hurt him again. Her trembling hand in his snapped him back, but the memories clung stubbornly, refusing to release him. He remembered a girl not unlike her, fearful, pleading, trapped in a life he couldn't save. He had tried, desperately, to offer safety, but fate had a cruel way of intervening. Her cry for help had haunted him for years, echoing in quiet moments like the distant rumble of thunder outside the barn. He had turned away then, thinking that distance was protection, that by walking away, he could shield himself from the unbearable weight of failure. Now, standing in the barn, he felt the ghost of that old failure gnaw at him. Her fear, so raw and unfiltered, mirrored the fear he had failed to soothe before. His hands twitched at his sides, torn between the instinct to flee and the moral pull to comfort. The rain outside blurred the boundaries of past and present, the cold seeping into his bones as if it carried the memories of countless storms he had weathered alone. She pressed closer again, sensing his hesitation. I'm not asking for forever," she whispered, voice barely audible above the drumming rain. "I just need you here now." Each word was a lifeline, each pause a reminder that she was fragile, dependent, and human. He swallowed hard, the old pain colliding with the present, and for a fleeting second, he imagined what could have been if he had stayed with the others he had lost. The barn seemed to shrink around them, the storm outside intensifying the tension between past regrets and present responsibility. His jaw clenched, eyes narrowing as he fought to suppress the memories threatening to overwhelm him. And yet every flicker of her fear-stricken eyes, Every desperate tremble of her hands chipped away at the wall he had built around his heart. For the first time in years, he felt the dangerous pull of hope, the possibility that maybe, just maybe, he could do better this time. That he could stand firm, not run, and protect someone who truly needed him. The thunder rolled again, louder, and he exhaled slowly, glancing down at her pleading face, realizing that he could no longer ignore the echo of his own past mistakes. The barn seemed to hold its breath, as if the storm itself had paused to witness the fragile moment between them. They stood just a few feet apart, neither moving, both suspended in the tension that thickened the air like heavy fog. Outside, the rain fell relentlessly, hammering the roof in a frantic rhythm that mirrored her heartbeat. Her small hand still clutched at his coat, desperate for any sign that he might stay. I can't face this alone, she admitted, her voice trembling. The words barely left her lips before they cracked under the weight of fear. If you go, I don't know how I'll survive. She swallowed hard, eyes glistening, and took a small, tentative step toward him, as if closing the gap could force him to choose. The cowboy's eyes narrowed, jaw tight. He wanted to speak, to offer reassurance, but the memories of past failures lingered like shadows he couldn't shake. Every instinct told him to step away, to protect himself from the inevitable heartbreak he feared. Yet as he watched her, vulnerable and trembling, he felt a pull stronger than fear, a pull he could no longer ignore. Time seemed to stretch, each second dragging out into an eternity. Her gaze locked on his, desperate, pleading, holding him in place like a tether. Please, she whispered again, voice breaking, don't leave me, not now. Not ever. His hand hovered near hers, a silent battle waging within him. Step forward or step back. Each option carried its own pain. The barn smelled of wet hay and rain, mingling with the raw human urgency between them. Outside, lightning flashed, illuminating the determined lines of her face. The tear tracks etched across her cheeks. For a heartbeat, he almost moved away, almost gave in to the fear that had kept him distant for so long. But then she pressed her hand into his, small and trembling, grounding him. Her eyes locked onto his with an intensity that cut through every lingering shadow of doubt. He exhaled slowly, feeling the tension ripple through him like a rope stretched to its limit. The storm outside seemed to soften, as if it too waited for his choice. And in that standstill, frozen between fear and courage, he realized that leaving was no longer an option. At least, not if he wanted to be the man she needed. The barn felt smaller now, the space between them charged with something unspoken. Rain pattered softly on the roof, a gentler rhythm than before, as if the storm outside recognized a shift in the moment. The cowboy's gaze softened, the tension in his shoulders easing just enough for her to see the humanity behind his rugged exterior. I care, he admitted, voice low, almost a whisper. The words felt foreign to him, rough-edged yet sincere. He had spent years avoiding attachments, believing that caring meant inevitable pain. But standing there, seeing her fear, seeing her trembling vulnerability, he realized the truth. He had never stopped caring. He had only buried it beneath walls too high to climb. Her eyes widened, a mixture of disbelief and relief washing over her tear-streaked face. You mean it? She asked, voice trembling. Each syllable was weighted with hope and fear, the precarious balance of her heart laid bare. Yes, he said, meeting her gaze. I mean it more than I can say, and I can't walk away this time. Not from you. His hand moved slowly, hesitating for a heartbeat before brushing a wet strand of hair from her face. The simple touch carried warmth, reassurance, and a promise he wasn't yet ready to voice aloud. She inhaled sharply, the tension in her body easing just slightly. For the first time that night, she allowed herself a fraction of hope, fragile but real. I've been so scared, she confessed, voice breaking as she pressed her hands against his chest. I didn't think anyone could ever care enough to stay. To really stay. He swallowed, the weight of his past failures pressing against him once more, but this time it didn't push him away. Instead, it fueled his determination. I've made mistakes, he admitted, voice rough with honesty. But I won't make the same mistake with you. Not now, not ever. The barn seemed to exhale with them, the storm outside retreating into a gentle drizzle. Shadows softened, and the golden glow of a lantern flickered across their faces, illuminating their vulnerability and the growing connection between them. The distance that had separated them began to shrink, replaced by shared understanding and cautious hope. She pressed closer, resting her forehead against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her hands. "Thank you," she whispered, voice trembling with emotion. "For not leaving, for caring." For the first time in a long while, he allowed himself a small, genuine smile. "You don't have to thank me," he said. "Just stay with me tonight. That's enough for now." And in that quiet, flickering light, they found the first fragile threads of trust, bridging the gap between fear and connection, past and present, desperation and hope. The barn was quiet now, save for the soft rhythm of rain falling on the roof. Outside, the storm had begun to ease, leaving a fresh, earthy scent in the air. Inside, the tension remained, thick and heavy, as if the very walls were holding their breath. The cowboy stood just a step away from her, his hand hovering in the air, caught between instinct and desire. Every fiber of his being screamed at him to pull back, to retreat to the safety of solitude. Yet another voice, one he hadn't listened to in years, urged him to stay. She looked up at him, her eyes wide, glistening with hope and fear intertwined. "I can't live without you," she whispered, her voice trembling, raw and honest. "I need you here now, tonight. Please." Each word struck him like a bullet, piercing the carefully constructed armor around his heart. He could see every unspoken fear in her eyes, the desperate need for someone to hold her, to protect her from the world. His mind raced, weighing the choice. He had walked away from pain before, from loss, from love, but he realized that leaving now would mean abandoning not just her, but a chance to be more than the man haunted by his past. He swallowed hard, jaw tight, heart thundering in his chest. The fear of failure clawed at him, but the pull of responsibility and something deeper, something almost like love, kept him rooted in place. She stepped closer, pressing her hands into his chest, holding him as if sheer force of will could keep him from moving away. "Please, I'm begging you," she said, voice breaking. "Don't turn your back on me." Her words were simple, but the weight behind them was immense, an anchor pulling him toward a decision he'd avoided for far too long. The cowboy inhaled, eyes locking onto hers, and for a moment the world fell away. The storm outside, the barn around them, even the shadows of his past all faded into insignificance. There was only this moment, this choice, and the fragile, trembling hope she offered. Finally, his hand found hers, not hesitantly, but with deliberate care. He stepped forward, closing the distance, and gently drew her into his embrace. "I won't leave," he said softly, voice low and steady. "Not tonight. Not ever." Relief flooded her face, tears spilling freely as she clung to him. The storm outside had faded into a gentle drizzle, but inside, a different kind of warmth began to grow, a warmth born of trust, courage, and a choice made not out of obligation, but out of the heart. In that embrace, the barn became a sanctuary, a place where fear was met with courage, and desperation was answered with steadfast presence. The choice was made, and in that choice they found the fragile promise of something new, hope. The barn was quiet now, the storm reduced to a soft drizzle, leaving the world outside washed and glistening. Inside, the air felt lighter, the heavy tension replaced by a fragile warmth. The cowboy and the woman remained in each other's embrace, neither rushing to speak, content to simply exist in the shared calm after the storm. She rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. It was a rhythm she had feared she would never feel again, a grounding presence that told her she was no longer alone. He held her gently, mindful of the fragility in her posture, aware that both of them had been worn down by fear, pain, and loss. Yet, in that simple closeness, they discovered something neither had expected: trust. Outside, the rain had softened to a drizzle, sunlight beginning to pierce through the clouds, casting a gentle glow across the barn. Shadows danced along the walls as if celebrating the quiet triumph of connection over fear. The cowboy lifted his chin slightly, gazing down at her face. She looked back at him, eyes shining with relief and gratitude, a small, tentative smile tugging at her lips. For the first time in a long while, he allowed himself a genuine smile, one that carried both relief and quiet hope. "We'll be all right," he whispered, almost to himself, almost to her. She nodded, squeezing his hand lightly, feeling a sense of safety she hadn't known she could ever have. The storm outside had passed, leaving a world renewed, and inside the barn, something else had been reborn. A bond forged in desperation and honesty, tempered by fear but strengthened by choice. The night had tested them both, revealing vulnerabilities and fears they had kept hidden. And yet, here they were, standing together, having chosen to stay. Having chosen to face the uncertain future not as strangers, but as partners, as they finally pulled back slightly, their hands still entwined. A quiet understanding passed between them. The hardest step had been taken, the one that mattered most, the step toward each other. And in that shared space, amidst the faint smell of rain and hay, they found something rare and precious, a beginning built not on certainty, but on courage, presence, and the promise of trust.